Tonight, we travel to Paris, not the bright, romantic Paris filled with music and laughter, but a quieter one. A city wrapped in shadow, narrow streets, dim gas lamps, windows closed tight against the night. A soft breeze carries the faint scent of rain and smoke. The cobblestones glisten slightly, reflecting the lamplight, and the city is still for now. The wind whispers through the narrow alleys, carrying faint echoes of distant footsteps. Occasionally, a carriage rolls past, its wheels clicking along the wet stone. The city seems alive, yet somehow asleep. I had been living in Paris for several months when I met a man named Auguste Dupin. Dupin was not like other men. He preferred darkness to daylight, silence to noise, thought to conversation. During the day, he kept the curtains drawn and the room dim. At night, he would light a single lamp and allow his mind to wander freely. He loved puzzles, not ordinary puzzles, but the kind hidden inside people, inside crimes, inside impossible situations. And soon, the city would present him with one of the most baffling mysteries it had ever seen. One morning, Paris awoke to shocking news. A terrible crime had taken place in a small apartment on the Rue Morgue. 2 women, a mother and her daughter, had been found brutally murdered inside their own home. Neighbors reported hearing screams in the middle of the night, terrified cries, loud crashing sounds, and something even stranger, 2 voices. One voice was clearly French. The other, no one could identify. Witnesses insisted it was not French, not English, not Spanish, not German. Each person was certain it belonged to a different language, yet none could understand a single word. When police arrived, they forced their way inside the apartment. What they found was horrifying. The room was in chaos, furniture overturned, drawers ripped open, glass shattered. It looked like a violent struggle had taken place. But the strangest part, the doors and windows, were locked from the inside. There was no clear way anyone could have escaped. The daughter's body was discovered stuffed upside down inside the chimney. The mother was found in the courtyard below, her body broken, her throat deeply cut. There was no clear motive, no robbery, no witnesses who saw anyone enter or leave. It was as if the killer had vanished into thin air. Paris was terrified. The police were completely confused. When Dupin read the newspaper account, I saw something unusual in his eyes, not fear, not horror, curiosity. He leaned back in his chair, the room lit only by candlelight, and said quietly, "This case is not impossible. It is merely misunderstood." That was the moment our involvement began. The apartment on the Rue Morgue stood tall and narrow, pressed between 2 other aging buildings. Its windows were high, its doors thick and heavy, the kind of place where sounds echo strangely at night. The neighbors had been the first to react. Just after midnight, a scream tore through the silence, not a startled cry, but a scream filled with panic. Raw, desperate, lights flickered on in nearby windows. Voices whispered across balconies. Someone shouted from the street below. Then came the crashing sounds. Furniture striking walls, wood splintering, more screams too this time, and then silence. A silence so sudden, so complete, that it felt unnatural. A group of neighbors gathered quickly. They rushed up the narrow staircase and pounded on the apartment door. No answer. The screams had clearly come from inside. With growing fear, they forced the door open. Inside, chaos. Chairs overturned. A bed ripped apart. Drawers emptied onto the floor. Shards of glass scattered everywhere. It looked like a storm had passed through, but this was no storm. This was violence. The daughter was nowhere in sight at first. It took several minutes before someone noticed something strange about the fireplace, the chimney. After climbing onto the hearth and peering upward, they made a horrifying discovery. The young woman's body had been forced deep inside the chimney, upside down, her limbs twisted unnaturally. It had taken several men to pull her free. There were bruises around her throat, marks of immense strength, but no clear weapon. The mother's body was found later, thrown from a window into the courtyard below. Her injuries were severe. Her throat cut so deeply that the wound alone seemed impossible. Whoever had done this possessed extraordinary force. Yet there were no footprints outside. No witnesses had seen anyone leave, and every window and door had been locked from the inside. The next morning, neighbors and police began to tell their stories. Everyone remembered the screams, the mother's shriek, the daughter's panic. But there was something strange about what followed. Some said they heard two voices, speaking loudly and clearly. One sounded like a Frenchman, smooth, confident. The other impossible to identify. It was not French, one witness said, nor English, another insisted. It's unlike any language I've ever heard, said a third. The police were bewildered. They had no suspect, no motive, no weapon, and a room locked from the inside. They began to interrogate witnesses. Each person told a slightly different story. Some claimed the voices were angry. Some said they were pleading. Some said they heard a crashing sound, like heavy furniture being tossed. Others insisted it was a single, quick slam. Conflicting reports, contradictory memories. Yet all pointed to one chilling truth. Something extraordinary had occurred inside that apartment. I watched Dupin carefully as he absorbed each account. He did not frown. He did not gasp. He did not shake his head in disbelief. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, fingers lightly steepled, eyes distant yet sharp. This, he murmured, is exactly the kind of case that excites the analytical mind. The key is not to see what is present, but what is impossible. I could not help but ask him again. What do you mean, Dupin? He turned toward me, eyes gleaming in the candlelight. The police are blinded by the ordinary. They assume a human perpetrator. But the evidence, the voices, the strength, the escape, it defies human explanation. Paused, as if savoring the puzzle. The solution will reveal itself only when we abandon what we think possible and examine what is logical. Next morning, Dupin and I returned to the Rue Morgue. The streets of Paris were quiet, damp from an overnight rain. Gas lamps glimmered faintly through the mist. The apartment loomed before us, tall and narrow, pressed between its aging neighbors. The chaos of the night before seemed frozen in time. Overturned chairs, shattered glass, and an air of uneasy silence. Dupin moved deliberately, his gaze scanning every corner. The flickering sunlight caught the edges of broken furniture, casting strange shadows that seemed to shift as we walked. He crouched beside the chimney where the daughter had been found. His fingers traced the soot-lined bricks slowly, knotting scratches, smudges, and marks too small for a human hand. "Observe carefully," he murmured. "Every detail is a story. Every mark, every crack, every imperfection tells you something about the events that occurred here." I watched, trying to follow his thought process. The angles of the scratches, the displaced furniture, the subtle weight marks on the floor, they all seemed like chaos to me. But to Dupin, they were a map of logic, a silent language revealing what had happened. He paused, crouched low beside the hearth. "Notice the angles. The force required is beyond human strength, yet precise. It suggests something agile, something that can climb where no human could fit. A creature of instinct rather than thought." I shivered. "A creature, you mean?" "Yes," he said softly. "Not human in the sense we imagine." Moved carefully through the apartment, examining drawers, windows, and every nook. Even the smallest details, a slightly ajar cupboard, a displaced curtain, held meaning. Dupin's eyes missed nothing, he said. "A hurried mind sees only confusion. A calm mind sees the truth." After our initial inspection, we returned to the neighbors and witnesses. We retraced the night's events through their accounts. Dupin asked questions slowly, deliberately, allowing each person to describe what they had heard and seen without interruption. Some described the screams of the mother, sharp, piercing, filled with desperation. Others described the daughter's voice, faint and panicked, echoing through the narrow streets. Then came the second voice, impossible to identify. Witnesses argued quietly among themselves, each insisting they were correct. "Listen to the contradictions," Dupin whispered. "They are not errors. They are clues. Each mind filters the impossible through its own expectations." Hours passed as we pieced together the testimony. One man insisted he saw the shadow of a small, moving figure along the wall, though no such figure could exist. Another swore he heard objects flying through the air, heavy, deliberate movements. The room, in hindsight, became a silent stage for the mystery. Every shadow, every echo, a possible clue. Dupin's eyes gleamed as he leaned back. Truth hides in what is consistent. Human minds remember differently, but logic does not lie. The sun began to dip. Dupin finally shared his theory. "The perpetrator is not human," he said quietly, almost reverently. I could barely believe it. "Not human?" "Yes," Dupin said calmly. "The strength, the angles of escape, the sounds, all point to creature, a being capable of actions far beyond a man. Specifically, an orangutan." He explained how the creature's mimicry could create the illusion of two voices, how its instinctive strength could overpower humans, and how its agility could navigate the impossible spaces of the apartment. I stared, trying to imagine a large, strong orangutan moving through the chaos, hiding bodies, mimicking sounds, and eluding everyone. Somehow, in Dupin's calm reasoning, it all made sense. "Everything fits," he said. "The confusion of witnesses, the locked room, the impossible strength, all explained by one logical cause." Reconstructed the night carefully, step by step. The merchant had brought the orangutan to Paris from Southeast Asia. The creature escaped accidentally, frightened and confused. It attacked instinctively, reacting to threats in the only way it could. In its panic, it injured the mother and daughter, hid the bodies, and left the apartment in chaos. Dupin pointed to marks on the floor, scratches on the chimney, and displaced furniture. Each movement is consistent with an animal of instinct, strong, precise, and unaware of human morality. The scene tells its own story, if you know how to read it. Then spoke of the witnesses again, explaining how human minds can misinterpret unfamiliar events. What seemed impossible was simply misperceived. The truth was clear once logic replaced expectation. The orangutan was eventually captured with the help of a sailor familiar with such creatures. It was returned safely to its master. Paris gradually returned to normal. Merchants reopened their shops, children played in the streets, and the city lights reflected softly in the Seine. Yet the mystery of the Rue Morgue lingered in my mind. Dupin and I walked along the river, lanterns casting golden reflections on the water. The calm night was a sharp contrast to the chaos of the crime scene. "I have often observed," Dupin said quietly, "that human beings assume the impossible cannot occur. But the world is full of what we do not immediately understand. To see clearly, one must abandon expectation." I nodded, feeling the truth of his words settle in me like the quiet night around us. As we returned to Dupin's quiet apartment, the events of the Rue Morgue replayed in my mind. A crime so violent, yet logically. Who interpreted what they could not understand? A creature so strong, agile, and instinctive it left everyone bewildered. Dupin sat in his usual chair, candlelight flickering softly, casting shadows that danced slowly along the walls. He seemed calm, serene, as if the chaos outside could never touch him. "Every mystery," he said softly, "is like a shadow on the wall. Look closely, and you will see the shape. Understand its logic, and fear disappears. The city slept again, unaware of the strange events in that narrow apartment. And Dupin returned to his quiet room, ready for the next puzzle, the next impossible crime to unravel. Outside, the Seine reflected the lights of the city, calm and untroubled. And for the first time since the Rue Morgue murders, I felt a deep, unbroken silence settle over Paris. A silence that spoke of mystery solved and of calm restored.